constant, self-destructive, self-sabotaging. I call this the negative feedback loop of these self-destructive thoughts over and over and over. Because, of course, if I'm not happy, I wasn't the one who got God in me.
So what's the true definition of happiness?
I don't have that. You have to define that. It's just like I asked you one day in class, how many of you want to be rich?
I don't.
Bullshit. Everyone wants to be rich.
No, I'd rather not be rich.
We put it on pants?
Everyone who wants to be rich.
No, not rich.
We'll let Marcia not be rich. That's fine.
No.
Raise your hand. Now, the reason I say bullshit is because your definition of rich may be having a healthy family, might be having enough money in the bank to pay the bills, where his might be, fuck that, I want shitloads of cash, bitch.
Yeah, no, I'd rather just.
So that's the difference. That's the difference. When my kids were little, I would say, we're rich because we have love and family and God and yay! Okay? So it depends on your definition to determine what your version of happiness is. But I can guarantee you that your definition of happiness links back to this and what was missing and flawed at your parents at the moment of conception. That shit I can guarantee you. It's textbook. And that's the shit you're chasing. So you're chasing a false self, a false sense of happiness, a happiness that's for some other two people. And of course you're miserable, because who the fuck are you? Who the fuck am I? And add to that, what the fuck do I want? They say it's only women. I'm not so sure of that. Okay? Now, what is the difference in polytheistic religions like Hinduism? So here you have Kali, here you have Ganesha, here you have Hanuman, here you have Vishnu, I'm being sacrilegious right now because
You're delivering too many goods.
now we've gone to gods. What are the Eastern philosophies teaching? Where's God? God is within. That's the difference in a belief system. And do not get me wrong, they are just as fucked up and distorted with devouts and Shiites and fighting. I am a Shiite, I'm a Kaliite, I'm a Hare Krishna. Same bullshit. This is not, I'm just trying to explain why these stories, these mythologies, sort of are a little easier to explain the psychological organs versus the Judeo-Christian, unless you study more of the mystic part of the Judeo-Christian religions. So, you've got one version of the Divine Mother. You've got Hanuman, who is loyal to Rama and Sita, will do anything. He controls the mind. He's the god of wind. He grows. He shrinks. He's amazing. He's my boo. You've got Ganesh, who is an elephant head, because Shiva, who is here, was his father, angry motherfucker. His mother says, Ganesh, guard the door, I'm going to take a shower. So Ganesh, like a nice little boy, guards the bathroom door. And Shiva's like, get the fuck, open the fucking door. And Ganesh is like, no, my mom said not. And he like barged in and chopped off his kid's head. All of a sudden, he's like, oh fuck, I chopped off my kid's head, runs outside, finds an elephant, your face, and puts the elephant head, and now Ganesh is Elephant Boy. And he is the one that protects, and he is the one that brings you riches, and he has little sweets in his little corner, and he's usually with a mouse, because the mouse is the ego, and he usually has like this little coconut little treat, and that's Ganesh. And then you have Vishnu, and if anyone meditates, if you've ever sat like this is called the Vishnu Mudra, and it is for balance, because these two fingers are space and air to control the mind and to be in balance. And he is part of what they call the Trimurti, which everybody who has ever heard of Father, Son, Holy Ghost, sound familiar? In Hinduism, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, same thing. This is called a Trimurti. Oftentimes you will see these statues with 3 heads. And they represent God, but 3 aspects. However, this balanced aspect, which is going to be your archetype 48 to 52, is in you. You may not figure out how to do it. She may not understand how to stop flip-flopping from powerlessness to power with her rebel. But it's in there. Her Vishnu is in there. That 48 to 52 is in there. Okay? So what this allows in this polytheistic viewpoint is not that there is gods. There's only one God. Where is it? Inside. But there are different aspects.
What's that one's name? The one with the elephant head again?
That's Ganesh.
Okay, I knew I'd seen it before. It was in the show Sense 8, where
Yeah.
Kala would always go and pray.
Okay. And they usually in India pick one, and they have a temple
Kala.
to that deity. So they basically took this and they made it the whole opposite way, so to speak. But whatever, that's human nature, and that's not for me to criticize or comment on. But the idea is this not the same idea of we're around the campfire, and you have a balance aspect, and you have a little boy aspect that's a protector, and you have a really smart, loyal aspect, and you've got a crazy bitch aspect. So the stories and the book that all of these myths are in, I always massacre the name, but it's the Mahabharata. There's this huge war, talks about all of these myths, all of these stories. I have a bunch of myth books, but I left them on my desk. I can bring them after. And it's another way, and you can actually Google, they have the Mahabharata all on little kid animation, YouTube, for free. You can watch the whole story. And you see Hanuman little and growing, and he's so cute. And you're seeing the little aspects of you, the pieces of God within you. And that's why the show American Gods is so great, because all of the characters are just characters. Remember? All the eyes that live in you. So that's why these Eastern philosophies help explain yourself a little better, and we're having a huge migration of that in the States. People are very drawn to yoga and Buddhism and Taoism and things like that. And a big reason is that one of the basic tenets is God is inside of you. Now, do not get me wrong. This is not a license for you to become a raging narcissist. I'm God, fuck you, and om and I float. And that's a problem that I have. I've told you guys about my fear of the spiritual Holocaust. We'll talk more about that in another class. But the root, the origin of the so-called sacrilegious, as that priest said in the Joseph Campbell lecture, of polytheistic religions is that they actually are explaining, in my terminology, your psychological organs or your archetypes. So it's easier to understand yourself when you have all of these gods and faces to go with it. Go, oh, okay, today I have my Kali on. Okay, at this moment, Ganesh showed up in my life. Oh, at this moment, my Shiva was here. So that's the beauty, perhaps, of having this experience at a young age versus most of ours. And human nature is human nature, and there's fights, and there's sex, and there's devotees, and that is not the point of this. The point is that these things give us the aspects that live within. And so if you can narrow it with a tradition like Hinduism, or archetypes, or planets, all of a sudden, don't you have a structure to assist the client? Because now you can say, oh, I'm hearing the fool in them. Ooh, I'm hearing the saboteur. Ooh, I'm hearing the rebel. And if I know there's a rebel, I know that there has to be someone who fucking followed the rules or was forced to, who had to be dominated, and the only thing she knew how to do was say, fuck you. That's why when you talk, I hear and I just go, oh, 0 to 100, there it is. And I ask a question about the flip. You see, I'm not a mind reader. I'm really not that smart. It's just there's only so much that we can do. And since we're all the same story, with different costumes and different characters and different locations, hence, this isn't very difficult. And I'm talking about pretty standard things. I am not talking about abnormal, criminal. That is not my area. I am talking about a general thematic of how we try to take our false self, the stories, because your parents had all of these archetypes, all of these facets. Now, why would someone like her perhaps get the rebel and Aniela get more of the saboteur? Why would the proportions, even though she has a rebel and she has a saboteur, why would the proportions be different if everybody has a moment of conception and parents that have all of the traits? And why would your brother or your sisters have different proportions if you have the same parents, moment of conception, same parents?
Because we all have a little bit of everything, but some more than others.
Depending on what was happening
So let's say at the time.
at the time of the conception, the state of mind that your parents were at. And I'm going to pick on Miss Rapace. When her and her brother, you mind I share?
No.
Her parents were struggling financially. Her parents worked and worked and worked. When her sister was conceived, they were in what we would call a Lakshmi period. Lakshmi is the goddess of riches and money and abundance. So her sister, if you could see her face, the psychological orgasm that she gets is much more of Lakshmi and entitlement and abundance, because that what was the state of mind of the parents at conception. So her sister's false self is much more about abundance and wealth and entitlement than hers and her brothers that had more hard work, structure, Saturn, things like that, yes.
And my father, without knowing all of this, would say, you know, your sister acts the way she does because things were different when she came along. You know, so we had more to offer.
And that is called the what? The 0 to 7. The story that now Miss Rapace heard to confirm that this and this is exactly who she's supposed to be. And that her sister is exactly who she's supposed to be. So we're in a constant loop of proving the moment of conception, the origin story. I'm going to stick my language in your ass no matter what. Oh, you guys are going to speak my language. Over and over and over. Until we decide to say, dee, 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 boop, boop, boop. Now, are we going to shatter all of it? No. Are we going to pick the most self-destructive of our archetypes? The 0 to 100s? Those are the ones that we're going to work on. Those are the ones that are going to show up more and more and more. So you leave body image, or you leave abundance, or you leave the fact that you're 5'6" and not 6'5" aside. You pick your battles, because you only got so much time.
But because we leave it, we end up going back, circling back around and starting over. Because we leave that there instead of...
Well, that would be someone who believes in reincarnation. That would be very Eastern philosophy, and I'll address what I said about the mother in a second. And if you do, and that is a belief system, and I am no one to say yes or no. If you believe in reincarnation, then yes,
Well, no,
you will.
I'm sorry, I was going toward your 5 life cycles, like, you know, your realization or self-actualization of like the problem, and then you fix the problem, you go about it, and you come back around and start all over
Are you
again.
talking about the trans-theoretical model of behavior change?
Yep, sounds pretty much right. There it is. I was just trying to relate that to...
Yes, you're absolutely right. But the problem per se is not going to really change. And what is the problem going to be related to?
Oh, yeah, your origin story.
Okay, the moment of conception is probably going to be the center of that problem that circulates. And mine, I've told you over and over again, the whole thing with the feminine and the male and then that. And then my story, of course, lines up, and then not wanted, and then feeling worthless, and everything you know about me. So in this process of eliminating the false self, in this process of dying, of surrendering, of being hooked on a butcher's hook, you weren't here Tuesday, so you might want to watch the lecture, as that's what happens at the story. Before I get my involution, you have to die here. Like, you have to. And you're probably going to kill off that or this. And yes, Marsha, the problem is the solution, and the solution is a problem, because that's the 0 to 100. If she's a rebel, she had to have rules. Strict ass motherfucking handcuffed rules to say, ah. Do you see how it all weaves together? Do you see that the thread is really just usually one thing, and if you start pulling, the person unravels. They decide, James. They decide. Because Tanisha the other day was like, fuck that. I'm getting a 3rd level and saying, nah, not for me. And if your client does not want to unravel, and if your client wants to stay at the 1st gate or the 2nd gate, that is their prerogative, and you are nobody to tell your client that they have to go and eliminate their false self. That is not your job. You meet your client where they are. You do not work harder than the client. And if you have a need to fix them, that's your shit. And every one of you here is what? a narcissist. And every one of you here is a what? A servitude, not a servant. Because you're here to fix your shit. So we get caught up in wanting to take our client to the 7th gate. Nope. You take yourself to the 7th gate. You do your shit and leave your client where they want to be. That ain't your job. But use the session to see what you still haven't worked through. See what part of your origin story still owns you. That's the beauty of this profession when done correctly. That you really can take yourself with the clients that appear if you're doing your work. But again, you also have a choice to just stay in awareness. If that's enough, then that's enough. No one gets to tell you that you need to kill off your false self. Now, I will tell you that Kali will show up in your life and sort of force upon you a change when needed. Usually because your ego is just way too big and it's a humbling factor. But people tolerate Kali transits differently. Look how I told you I handled Cancer the first time. Fuck you, Cancer. So don't expect that everyone is going to handle a dark night, a false self, an opportunity to reach the 7th gate the same way. And it's not your job to tell them how to do it. And if they just want to be aware, and if they want to wallow in their victim, then give them the fucking tissues and let them. That's not your problem. That is not your job. And if you're having judgments, as you will, it's your own judgment. And you have to look at that. And guaranteed, there's somewhere that you haven't reached your 7th gate. Some false self in you that you haven't killed off. Because if not, you wouldn't judge it. Because anybody who goes through this process, that was the honesty of her when she was like, oh, hell no. Honesty. Fucking doing that. I'll stay where I am. I'm pretty okay. As most people do. If you have gone and gone down and been stripped and left naked and show up at Ereshigal's door, stripped of everything, humbled on your knees, you don't wish that on anybody. And that's where you become, what was your lovely archetype?
No, I kept saying that. It was,
A companion?
yeah, I just kept saying compassion. I put on the side compassion, so I was saying compassionate to somebody.
Thank you.
And you become the compassionate companion. And then, here's your PhD, 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 your PhD, your PhD, and your PhD. I don't give a shit what letters you have behind your name. If you don't do your own work and you don't get to this, when that person is in your room, I wipe my ass with the letters behind your name. Because you're not human. And when we do the chakras, I'll explain. And we talked a little bit about Chiron. So you already know, and that'll be your 3rd chakra. The animal and the human. We're all animals. We have to become human. And it is with experiences of Kali, when it's experience of the 7th gate, when we try to kill off our false self, when we try to birth ourselves new, when we say, fuck the moment of conception, I'm going to live my own life, then, and that requires humility.
Lots of it.
Yep.
Trust me.
So, honey, if your knees don't hurt, don't be judging shit.
I was gonna ask you, Hinduism, do you die after every, because I know I spoke about Brahmin and world religion class, and I don't know if I understood him right, but in order to get to those points, it's kind of like this, like you have to die at each station, and then,
Okay,
I don't know.
so there's the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Brahma is like the Holy Ghost equivalent. Okay, that's the aspect of God, the face of God, that's like the spirit. Okay, where you have Shiva, destructor and creator, which is second chakra, this thing. And then you have Vishnu, which is the balancer or the preserver, which allows us to stay here. So you basically have spirit, matter, and between spirit and matter or heaven and earth, you have the body. It's the same idea. It's Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. Same concept. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. So you see this. This is called in Hinduism the Trimurti. The three faces, so to speak, or three aspects. But in the Hindu tradition, in the Hindu religion, the belief is that once you die, you reincarnate. There are gates in this religion that are called lokas. And you can Google lokas. And it tells you, if you did this in your lifetime, this is the loka that you're going to. And there's 7 here, and there's 7 here. Same concept of heaven and hell, and the earth. And each loka is described in detail. If you live this kind of life, this is the loka that you're going to go to. And it is believed in Hinduism that if you've lived, there's no time in those realms. So you have to understand this abstractly. If you lived 80 years, you go to the loka for 80 years, and then you come back. And then another thing about Brahma, which maybe is what you're talking about, I don't know, as I'm trying to cover all bases, is the caste. In India, there's castes. And the Brahmin caste is the highest caste, and that's the caste of the educator. That's the one that's wealthy, that's the one that's allowed to study, that's the one that's allowed to eat meat. Slowly, that caste system is being eliminated. So you find a word with very different spellings and meanings, so I wanted to cover all bases because I didn't know which one you meant exactly. So this is the Egyptian tarot deck, and there is a card here where you are kneeling. Okay, so this is called the obelisk, and this card, if you pull this card, it means destruction of the false self. Someone comes and gets this card, oh fuck. You go, bitch, this is happening. Every single thing. It's the destruction of the false self. The tower is the exterior, and the people are jumping off the tower. So that's like the 7th gate. And notice, because you asked yesterday about the numbers, that's a 7 card. 7 in numerology is spiritual.
That's
Okay.
crazy. I dreamt with the number 7 the day before yesterday, and I woke up I didn't only wake up with that number, but I woke up with a couple numbers, and I had to write them all down because I was like, what the heck? Why did I dream of numbers?
Because numbers have significance. Because Pythagoras was a witch. As all scientists are. In the old days, science and spirit were one. We're the ones who separated it. Newton, all of these scientists, Galileo, they were all spiritists. There was no separation. It was science and it was God. Because they understood that there was something. We're the ones that now you're in one camp or the other, which is the bullshit. I had to learn that. I definitely was one of those people. I just want to show you this card of kneeling, and there's several, but there's one particular that I'm looking for. And any of the kneeling cards in any of these decks, and I have a bunch there you can look at, but are always going to be about humility or, so this one's a surrender, that's not the one I'm